Okay, here's a quick flashback into painting, because after all, PD Powder is not only about working with video and drawing animations, but it's also about coloring and painting in many different ways. As we recall, we have all sorts of preset brushes, and you can see that from the context bar that's below the menu bar. There's an option here which shows the currently selected brush, if it's one of those, and there are lots more. And some of these are just really very specialized types of brushes. They may dry out, they may do all sorts of funky stuff. Most of the time the parameters that control their appearance and their behavior are under the settings, and so you can see, for instance, here there's a dry out, and if you don't want that to dry out so quickly, you can reduce it to have less of a dry out. You can also have random hue if that is possible. There you go. So all sorts of other types of options to control there when you paint, including some kind of built-in post work for some gel or embossing, gouache, watercolor look. I love the translucent watercolor, and especially the lifting, the pigment lifting. What you do with that is basically it's kind of giving it the effect as if it's still wet paint underneath it, and if you select the color, it will bring it up there. Now this one's a little bit too harsh, so I'm going to reduce the opacity. I'm going to reduce the lifting amount or the intensity of that, and so we get that to work a little bit better here. So that way you get some really interesting effects for painting. Natural media is kind of where Dog Waffle started and focused on right from the beginning. But there are other things, and one thing that we want to do is really paint and change color quite easily. So we might actually start with a painting, perhaps that we load. Oh wait, we don't want to create a new one. We want to actually open an image, and we'll take that image of this Grand Canyon rendering that was created with the 3D designer in Dog Waffle. Actually, either the 3D designer, I forget, maybe it was Puppy Ray, the ray tracer, but at any rate, let's say we wanted to paint over that, or we wanted to in fact paint something similar, so we need to pick the similar tones, similar colors. So a couple of color pickers. This tutorial is going to focus on color picking and the quick color picker, and then also some of the other options you see here. So there are some color pickers right here. First of all, again, if you haven't worked with Dog Waffle, you see the primary and secondary color. You see them also in the toolbar at the bottom here, and you can switch the two. You can also see a couple of different color selectors here. There are the tabs here for the RGB values, RGB2, different types. There is a box selector, there's a triangle selector, so all sorts of different ways to select your colors. And then there are this options here gives you a pull down with additional options to select the colors by many other ways, by name, for instance, or a different floating color mixer or floating palette. You can even have any image that you load stored and turn it into a color picker. So store image copy, we have this one done before a lot. And so let's say you want this to actually be your color palette, your color picker. You simply click right there, and now it's a color picker. So as you draw and drag around here, it's going to paint, it's going to pick that color, so kind of a pink tone or a little bit of a bluish tone here, and then perhaps a bit of a brownish tone. All of these possible. Let's go and erase the background. There you go. So you know, normally when you're not in a color picker mode, the act of clicking on this image throws that image back into the main image buffer, right? So if I don't have this checked, it's now just a stored saved copy, and if I click it, it draws that back in. And if I click the menu, in fact, I can have it perhaps draw just one of the color channels or the hue saturation value channels, different ways to work with this. But this color here, this color picker, or turkey baster as we lovingly call it, will let you turn this into a color palette, and you simply pick your colors right from there. So no matter what it is, if you're using a color mixer, or if you're using an image of your own, or if you're using any of these other options, there are many other types of color pickers, including the system color picker, some red, yellow, blue swatches. Some of them will be meaningful if you're studying the art and science of colors. and there are many others to choose from. So I encourage you to explore those. There are also pigment profiles, and so tons of choices there. And finally, some of these really will be useful in conjunction with the right brush. So you'll want to also include what kind of brushes do you have here? Do you use particle brushes or watercolors, translucent or sponge style, all sorts of different effects for that. All right, so oh, this one has some paper texture too. That's another thing, that as you're painting, you see it reveal a little bit of the fabric that you're painting on, the paper texture. Right. So now there is one more color picker that we like to highlight. It's the quicker color picker, and you simply hit the space bar. Now I know in many programs, multimedia, especially with video and animation, spacebar is a toggle to turn on and off the animation. Well, this is not only an animation program, it's also a paint program. So spacebar is actually currently dedicated to toggling that color picker. And if you hit the spacebar and let go, you'll see it come and go again. So it's only there very quickly. It goes wherever your mouse is. If you move to the lower right, it's there. If you move to the center, it's coming up there, and lets you quickly pick the color. And when you're done, let go of the spacebar, and you now have that color. All right. So let's say you want yellow, go pick yellow, and boom, you're there. So that's the idea. It's a very quick color picker. Now, it's not the only color picker in there, and it's also not the only thing it does. It also has up to four brushes or media that you can store here. So if you have, for instance, this brush you want to use again, now you're painting with that one. All right. And let's say you want to change color, still the same thing. Change color with the spacebar, and so on. So let's say now we want to store another brush or use another brush first. Right click on the brush tool or click the brush pull down menu here, and for instance, let's go with, let's go one of the oils with splotchy, and there you go. Now this one has some dry out. Let's keep it, why not? And let's see if it picks the color green. There you go, color blue. All of these work just fine. So what we need is to store that. So here's what we do is we'll store that right there, right click on this placeholder, and it will place it in there. So now you can go click this one to go back to this brush, and you're there, and then click this guy with the left button and pick this one. So you can choose between your 4 favorite brushes du jour, of the moment, that you want to use intensely right now. Right, so up to 4 brushes you can store here. Now that's not the only thing you can customize. You can also choose a different intensity or saturation on that color picker, and you have different types of color pickers here. So let's see what we got there. We have this menu. Click on this little arrow here, and it will give you a number of different presets for additional types of color pickers. And that's really important if you're into drawing or painting with watercolors. You want those colors that are typically seen and used with watercolors. If you're into design or gouache, you have a slightly different saturation and layout. If you want country oils, or if you want, any of these will be really useful to work with, depending on which type of brush you're actually using. And you notice this one here, for instance, isn't staying on the same hue. As you're painting, some of the hues or some of the brightness or saturation are changing. So there are some darker parts and some lighter parts. And that's kind of the nature of simulation when it comes to oil painting, is that you have some older colors still in your brush, and it's kind of mixing them in as you're painting the new color. So that's one of the beautiful things about painting with oils and many other color techniques actually. So pastel landscape, pastel portrait, RGB natural, warm and deep, lots of different ways to give some preference to the colors that you want to put into your painting. And so that's what this tutorial is all about. I wanted to show you how you can choose colors from an existing photograph or from a rendering or from a painting, right? No reason why we couldn't, for instance, take this current image as another color as a color image. In fact, we don't need to waste all this white space around it. What we can do is we can go and select the area of interest, let's say about this much, right? We can highlight it even more with the alpha overlay, and we can use the control and drag it around to reposition it, and with the control key. And now that we've got this, we can say, okay, let's go and pick this up as a custom brush. And another thing you can do also is store this custom brush, but we are not going to need it as a brush so much. We are going to rather need it as an image like this one that we want to turn into a color picker like we did here with this turkey baster. So what we'll do is we'll go to the brush tool and say store the brush as an image. So now we have it actually as a stored image, just the same as we had over here. So when this one is not a brush, not a color picker, we can pick it and it loads the image back in. We've seen that. Same thing here. Pick it and it puts the image back in. Well, where did it go? Well, it's a small image, so it probably went in the upper left corner. There it is. So that's a case where we have a different dimension for this image than we do for this one. Different resolution, different detail. So what you could do is you could force it to scale. Where is it? The image scale to fit. So in that case, it will take this image and scale it to fit your current image buffer. But let's say you wanted this and we wanted to use this one as a color picker, right? So let's go simply turn the color picker on, and from now on you can paint here and you can go and choose your, let's say you get rid of this, let's choose your colors, let's choose your brushes, maybe airbrush. All right, so let's go medium-sized airbrush. Wait, did I pick it? Let's go again. There you go, airbrush, large airbrush. Okay, so now we've got this, and undo that with U or Control Z, and simply this is now a color picker. So we can go and use it. We can even make it a very vertical layout and have your color picker anywhere you want, and have at it and paint with that. So you see now this one, let's go at full size or even zoom in a little bit. Right, and so you can pick the colors and paint, pick the colors and paint. Now of course I don't know how to paint, so I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with it, but you know what you're looking for, you know what you're going to paint and shape or colorize and that sort of things. So I wanted to give you a quick intro to some of the color pickers that Project Dog Waffle now offers, and hope you have fun with it.